So Palworld has been out for a little bit over 2 weeks now, and in that short period of time, it's managed to garner so much controversy and hate from people. And you know, granted, some of that hate is justified, some of that criticism does make sense, but a lot of it also just seems like it's just blown out of proportion. And I wanted to just sit down, just go through the biggest issues that Palworld has been having, and kind of just see which ones are fair and which ones are just people just jumping on the hate wagon. So starting off with the claim that Palworld used generative AI on their PAL models and to just help them build the game because it was only about 10 people that were working on the game and they managed to release such a polished end results. People were claiming like, hey, okay, that's too little people for such a good end result. You probably used AI at some point to help you there. But that has already been debunked. The developers have already come out and made a statement saying pretty clearly like, hey, we actually did not use AI on our product, though to be fair, whether they did or they did not, it would be pretty easy to mask the fact if they actually did, so who's to say, right? We kind of just have to go by word of mouth just because of how easy it is to cover up usage of AI when it comes to like these sort of products. However, if they decide to come out tomorrow and say like, whoa guys, we actually did use AI, that honestly wouldn't surprise me either. I don't think it'll change my perception of the game that much, but it is what it is. The problem here is that the damage to Pocket Pair has already been done, thanks to the way that information just spreads so easily across the internet, especially misinformation. That one, for some reason, is just very easy to just spread across the whole internet, and you have one person who just makes a statement and suddenly everyone believes them. And thanks to that, you can go to Palworld's Steam page and just look at the reviews, and you have so many negative reviews that are just stating like, wow, I can't believe you guys actually used AI. I'm severely disgusted. Why didn't you guys tell us before? Well, you know, that's just how information spreads, unfortunately. Another big complaint that I hear from people is that Pocket Pair, the makers of Palworld, they have a track record of never finishing their games. They just leave their games in early access and kind of just abandon them, and the people are stating that that's what happened with their previous game, Craftopia. Craftopia is also an open world survival game with crafting, farming, resource gathering, automation, very similar to Palworld, and people are saying like, whoa, these two games are kind of a little bit too similar, to the point that people are believing that Palworld really is just a reskinned Craftopia with Pokemons added into it, just to give it that flavor. So they're stating that Pocket Pair had a failing game and they saw an opportunity in the market, and they're just like, hey, let's take our failure of a game, just add Pokemons into it, and whoop, it's an instant banger. And the main reason that they're going off of this is because you can see a very big resemblance in terms of aesthetics between Craftopia and Palworld, and there's also a lot of like reused mechanics and assets, which, you know, people are severely upset about. But the reality is that companies, especially gaming companies, they reuse assets all the time, right? It's not something new, it's not something different. Of course, when it's done lazily, when it's done sloppily, then yes, you do have like, whoa, why are you doing this, man? At least put some effort. But, you know, there's no reason to just have to make every single game completely from scratch. Of course, you have Call of Duty that just recycles their guns over and over again, and people have some sort of criticism towards that. But if you take a look at Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, they're basically using the same character model, the same map and everything, but, you know, it's so different in the way how the game works and the way you play the game that people can justify like, hey, even though you're reusing the same map, it's a completely different experience and it's a lot more fun than the previous one. So gaming companies reusing their assets is nothing new, and it's actually pretty normal in the game development process. And the statement that Craftopia has been completely abandoned also isn't really true, because I looked at the Steam page and they actually have been receiving regular updates, and people have actually been commenting and leaving reviews saying like, hey, all this hate that the game is getting recently really is just the fact that Palworld is so popular. People are looking for other reasons to hate Pocket Pair, the company, because the game is actually pretty lively. You know, it's not a perfect game by any means, but it's getting regular updates and it's getting like a big chunk of content. So that one rumor that's going around that Pocket Pair just abandons their games and just completely forgets about it, that's also really just people jumping on the hate wagon. And because of that, if you look at the reviews for Craftopia, a lot of the recent ones have been very negative reviews. Meanwhile, the overall reviews of the game have actually been fairly positive, you know? So you can clearly tell when something's being review bombed here. And to bring up the conversation about the elephant in the room, Pokemon and the potential lawsuits that Palworld might be facing, you know, I do think that Palworld definitely took a page out of Pokemon's book. They try to copy off the homework, and they're not really shy about it either, you know? You look at the side-by-side comparisons, everyone's seen them, and people can go like, oh wow, you really did just copy Pokemon. Yeah, you know, I don't think they've been shy about the fact that they really did do that. That was their main selling point. They were like, hey, we brought these Pokemon-looking creatures, and look, you can actually shoot them, and you have guns, and you can put them to work and stuff. Are we being obvious about it? Yes. Is it hurting Nintendo? Maybe. We're gonna try. You can tell that the intent is there. So whether or not Nintendo wants to shut down Palworld and wants to issue a copyright strike, or even if they have enough grounds to be able to do that, I don't really know. I'm not a lawyer here, I don't pretend to be, but all I know is that the trailer for Palworld has been out for a very long time, and you know, these character models that they've presented are not nothing new that just came out a month ago. You know, this has been out and announced for a long time, and the game has been released, and there hasn't been a big stinker from Nintendo's side, you know, because if Nintendo does have an issue with something and wants to shut it down, they shut it down. This is the company that shuts down Smash tournaments just because they're using mods on the game. So I can imagine that if they see a game that's potentially infringing on their properties and their IPs and their copyrights, they would be very quick to take that down. And seeing as how they haven't yet, and they've actually come out with a statement saying like, guys, we recognize your complaints, we know that this thing exists, we're looking into it, and if we see something that's ours that's not supposed to be there, we'll make sure to do something about it. You know, at least they released that statement, but the fact that they haven't done anything just leads me to believe that they're probably not going to do anything. However, speaking of mods, they did send a very pretty, a very beautiful takedown notice to that one mod developer that was making Pokemon into Palworld, right? They changed the main character for Ash, and they changed and reskinned a lot of the pals to look like Pokemon. That was actually a pretty interesting project that was being worked on, that was all over YouTube and all over Twitter, and I'm not going to post any footage because I'm not trying to get a copyright takedown here, but, you know, Nintendo was very, very quick to take that down. So it just leads me to believe if they wanted to do something, they would have done it already. All right, so addressing the gameplay in Palworld itself, one of the biggest issues that people have been facing is the fact that there's a lot of hackers and a lot of griefers in game. So when it comes to like online multiplayer, if you can just go online and, you know, pair up with strangers, there's a very real possibility that the people that you pair up with, which are just strangers from the internet, they can just go ahead and destroy your base. They can just ruin everything that you've worked for, and there's no real consequence for them. You know, there's nothing that they lose because they just go and visit what you've been working on and you go like, wow, that's a pretty cool struct. Well, it's all gone. Let me just break it. Let me just destroy it. Well, that's it. You're gone. The online experience in Palworld, if you're not playing with friends or if you're not playing solo, sounds like such a miserable experience. I haven't gotten the chance to do it myself because I don't trust strangers on the internet, but just the fact that I'm seeing so many people talk about it in Steam reviews about how there's so many cheaters and so many griefers in game just ruining the gameplay experience for everyone else, it kind of sucks. I wish there was a way to like deter that or just have some sort of way of have them not mess with your stuff, but that doesn't seem to be the case. That seems to be something that's just happening, and it's kind of funny when you hear about it, to be honest, but I'm pretty sure if it happens to you, you're gonna be royally pissed off. But, you know, talking about wasting hours online, or at least putting hours online, people are discovering that after diving for a couple of hours into the game, they start to realize something that they don't really notice at first, but it becomes much more of a glaring and apparent issue the more hours that they put into the game, and once they enter like the mid to late game. The problems that people are starting to notice within Palworld has to do with the game's content, or lack thereof of content, because remember guys that the game is still in early access. People are expecting this game to be completely developed and have a fully fleshed out storyline, but the reality of the matter is that it's, you know, it's still early access. They're still going to keep updating the game and throwing out stuff into the game, but in the state that the game is right now, once you reach level 25, I guess, once you have your base pretty well established and you have, you know, your little automation farm running, you kind of realize that there's really there's not much to do in the game, right? So once you enter the mid to late game, the initial gameplay loop that had you addicted for so many hours in the beginning kind of just starts wearing off. So the initial gameplay loop was like, whoa, let me capture this Pokemon that I'm fighting. Okay, now it's mine. I can put it to work. And while that thing's gathering resources for me, I can go look for more Pokemon so then I can train them and level them up and fight even stronger Pokemon to then which I can put to work. And that's kind of like what keeps the Steam engine running for a little bit. But once that's already been established, we got kind of just like sitting there on a pretty empty looking map, trying to see if there's anything to do in the game other than just gather resources, level up, and capture pals. So there's not that much of an intense storyline that's keeping you engaged at that point. And to be honest, the boss fights that are in the game are kind of just pretty underwhelming, right? You know, they can be challenging, don't get me wrong. They can be fun, they can be engaging, but there's no lead up to them. There's no grand storyline. There's no big bad evil that, you know you have to defeat. It's kind of like you just walk into the tower and there's some guy waiting for you. You fight him, you beat him, and that's it. That's done. But what now? you know? So there's a lot of like what now moments, right? And this is where Pokemon and Palworld kind of differentiate, because it is an open world survival game, and survival games are not really known for having their fully fleshed out stories. So it's not so much about diving into the story versus you playing the game kind of just like however you want to. So if you want to focus on collecting all the pals and finishing your pal deck, you can do that. If you just want to disregard that and then just build some pretty awesome and crazy structures like how you see on Twitter all the time, you can also do that. So the game gives you that freedom of do whatever the hell you want with the game, which is pretty nice, but it's definitely not everyone's cup of tea. So a lot of people that get into Palworld expecting, you know, some grandiose fight the gym leaders kind of experience and then just become the Palworld master, you're not really gonna get that in the game, or at least not yet. At least the way the game that is right now, it's pretty lacking. You know, it is pretty lacking. It doesn't mean it's not fun, because it is enjoyable, and my recommendation is that if you haven't gotten Palworld yet, you can still get it, you can still enjoy it, you'll have a lot of fun into it, and you'll dump a lot of hours into it, that's for sure. And seeing how the game is pretty devoid of content right now, a lot of people are worried that Pocket Pair is just gonna abandon the game, because they do believe that Pocket Pair just seems to abandon and leave all their games in early access. The one thing I will say is that Palworld has had one of the most amazing opportunities that you've ever seen in a video game, with such a giant surge in player base. And if you look at the Steam charts of how many people are currently playing, the player base in Palworld is still very strong. The memes are coming in. It has a lot of social impact. Pocket Pair themselves, I'm just gonna say it, if they decide to abandon the game now and stop giving it updates, that's gotta be one of the dumbest moves I've ever seen any game company do. So it really depends on how they decide to move forward with this, and I really do hope that we get a bunch of more updates other than just like, hey, here's another pal. Hey, here, no content, by the way, just more pals, you know. I really want to see the game put out more content, more story, and then, you know, a lot more things to do other than just like, hey, here's a new pal that we released. But we'll see how the future ends up unfolding for Palworld. If you haven't tried it yet, I still gotta say it's an amazing experience for only $30. It does get a lot of warranted criticism with the cheater situation and the save files being deleted, and just like the overall lack of content because it is an early access game, let me just reiterate that. But it also gets a bunch of like plain blind hatred for it just because it is popular, and it's popular to hate on the popular thing. So yeah, that's all I really want to talk with you guys today. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.